Yes.
And now the Prophet Isa says he's going to come back. He's going to rule for how many years?
40.
40. Is that he's going to rule for 10 years because he's 30? Does that mean he's going to die at 40? He's going to rule 40 more years.
Okay. Question is regarding the Prophet Isa and his rule. Okay. He whether he will be ruling 40 years, what that means and how that pans out. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. His rule for 40 years will mean that when he comes back again, it's mentioned in the hadith collections, particularly Kitab al-Sharia, which quotes chains of transmission, that the wetness in his beard from the wudu that he made when he was taken up will still be there. So he's not aged. So when he comes again, he will rule for 40 years. And he will take a wife, and he will have progeny. Or actually, it says he'll get married. It doesn't mention wife, but it mentions marriage. So it could be one or more. And he will have progeny, and then he will die. Now, 40 years of rule will lead to him being 73 at his death. He will be 73 at his death and buried. And from that point, after the death of the Mahdi and the death of Isa, because remember, there is a global kingdom of monarchy over the world in which the whole world are believers externally. At the death of the Messiah and Imam al-Mahdi, an apostasy will occur again. After that apostasy, the cool wind will come from Sham, and every Muslim that smells it will die. And nothing will be left on the earth but the unbelievers. That's part of a long hadith in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, under the chapter that Islam will reign over every religion, although the idol worshippers hate it. Under that chapter, you read it, it's part of a long hadith, a few pages long, that discusses this affair. Yes? Is there another question? Yes.
Sheikh Ibn Arabi, he talks about legislative prophethood and general prophethood. And Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was the last legislative prophet. Am I right to assume then, as of Khizr and Isa alayhi salam, when they come back, they will be from the general prophethood? Or is there any...
The question is regarding a statement from Ibn Arabi regarding legislated prophethood and general prophethood. And the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam being the last prophet. And then when they come again, these prophets like Isa and Idris and Ilyas and Al-Yasa, that they will have general prophethood. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. I think the best way to go about this is to take a general understanding. Prophets, as we said, they never stop being prophets. So when these prophets return, just as they were governed under his law before, they're still governed under the law of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when they return. So the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, as we'll read, he tells the children of Israel, I've come to you making halal for you some things that have been made haram for you. Why? Because he doesn't have their legal framework. They're the ones that have disobeyed and had to be given additional stringencies and strictnesses because they went against the original law. But they're outside of that. The prophetic law that they have, the general law, is his law. So when we talk about these prophets, there won't be any interference with Khatamun Nabuwa or Khatamun Nabuwa, seal of prophethood. There won't be any contradiction with that because he was the seal from the beginning. And they are merely lights off of his prism. He is the prism. He is the prism. It's, as I said, it's his name that's engraved in the bottom of the throne, not theirs. And it's everyone in their grave when they go in there, whether they're Yanomamos from Venezuela or whether they are worshippers from Tuva Mount that are asked, what do you say about this name Muhammad? That's what they're asked, among other things. So it's true that these prophets come back, they're under his governance, but they nonetheless remain prophets. Their infallibility and all the other characteristics remain in place. Yes? Question?
Yeah, my question was going back to Mariyam alayhi salam. When Zakaria alayhi salam asked her with regard to the fruit season that was in her chamber, she gave a reply, Allah provides to whom He wills and without measure. Is that a sign that of her in the laduni in relation to her knowledge as a waliya? And obviously the Prophet Zakaria alayhi salam was obviously aware, probably more than aware, it's probably a rhetorical question, or maybe rhetorical. How are we supposed to perceive that narrative there?
Right. The question is regarding Mariyam as-Siddiqa alayhi salam and her knowledge that she had that the food that she was receiving, the sustenance, was from Allah when Zakaria asked her, and whether or not her reply was more rhetorical, or whether, the question was more rhetorical because of her rank as a waliya, because of her rank and what that means and how we should understand it. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. There's no doubt about it that Mariyam as-Siddiqa alayhi salam was a great waliya of Allah. No dispute about that. As for the significance of that exchange, there have been books written about just those few passages, big thick books, because there's discussion about the different levels and maqamat that the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have. Suffice it to say that in this short little vignette that I would give, the most I can say is that Maryam as-Siddiqa alayhi salam has, in that statement, shown when she's receiving food in due time from different seasons, she's showing utter and total dependence on Allah. And part of this is coming from the Ayan. Ayan is where you are able to see the direct means that Allah is giving you, even though it's coming through indirect means. So even though someone has delivered you food or what have you, you're able to say, Allah has sustained me, and mean it with conviction, because you're looking through the creation and seeing the direct transmitted sustenance of Allah. So if you ask people in a room, oh, who sustained, who feeds you, or who's giving you food, they're going to say, oh, my mom, or Asda, or Sainsbury's, not because they're not correct, but those people haven't yet fully come to a full comprehension that the seed that went into the ground that later sprouted, that had to be taken to the shop and shuffed off and had to have the wheat harvested and everything else, that's come from Him. They're not yet fully at that stage. They're still seeing the means. So, if you're still seeing the means, then you are in just the same position as someone who may hug their toaster and try to butter their toaster rather than butter the toast that comes out of it. Because you're only looking at the means and not the end result. And much has been written about this. So she was looking through the means at the direct result. So rather than butter your toaster, and rather than throw out your bread and butter your toaster and try to bite into that, you bite your bread. You butter your bread. Because the toaster is what? It's a means. I need to warm this bread. It needs to be burnt. It needs to be made brown. And then I need to butter it and use it. Toaster is just a means. The man that comes and knocks on your door and says, I have your groceries. You've ordered them online. He's just a means. And his means is no different than you pulling the radish or the carrot out of the ground and saying, oh, it's ready, it's in season. They're all means. But who is the one who gives the means? It's Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. If there's no further question, then we will break from here. And inshallah, next week we will start from Ayah 46. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Innahu ghafurur rahim. Ya arhamir rahimin. Assalamu alaikum.